Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Law of Attraction 2.0, Widening the Lens on the Law of Attraction. If you're enjoying Kris's unparalleled metaphysical content, then please hit the like button, subscribe, press the bell icon so that you get notified when we release cool, new metaphysical content. It's really the only way that the YouTube algorithm will notice Kris's work. So if you want to help out the channel, press the like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump into the content. And welcome everyone to a new episode of Law of Attraction 2.0, widening the lens on the Law of Attraction. And I'm super excited for this new series. I know we've been doing life from the inside out, and I think this does connect to it, but we wanted to go on a little bit of a different avenue and dive into a few topics. And we're going to be discussing with myself, Serge, and Myrna, and then bringing Kris in over a number of topics surrounding this. So again, I'm Dan Winkle. I've been working with Kris for 7 or 8 years now directly, and been producing and being on the shows with Serge and Kris over going on. This will be something like our 30th episode of these two series. So excited to be with you. Serge, you want to say hi?
Hi, and it's been that long? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like just a few weeks ago we started stuff. So that's kind of neat.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's 15, like 50, some of the episodes are 2 and a taping. So yeah, we've done about 15 tapings and 30 episodes or so.
Well, time flies, as they say.
And Myrna, you want to introduce yourself?
I do. Thanks, Dan. Oh, goodness. It's been thinking about this for quite a while. I've been a student of Kris for many years. And prior to meeting Kris, gosh, over a decade ago, I was a very avid follower of the law of attraction, as talked about with Esther Hicks channeling Abraham. In fact, I was at a New Age bookstore and a book supposedly fell off the shelf called "Me, Excuse Me, Your Life is Waiting." And in it, there was a mention of some tapes about what became the law of attraction. And we were able to find out that these were the early tapes of Esther Hicks channeling Abraham. So got a hold of her books and her tapes, and 7 years of really solid reading and talking and activating, and it was great. And then one day, my late friend John called to say, I think we have an Abraham here in Toronto. And this essence name is Kris, K-R-I-S, and channeled by Serge Grambois. And we said, sure, both of us, let's go find out. Well, gosh, I think that was 18 years ago, believe it or not.
Yeah, 2004, I think.
Yeah. And I, prior to all of this, had, been a student of a lot of mystery schools. Anyway, many years later, it's blown my mind, the information I've received, way beyond what I had learned with some of the basics of the law of attraction, way beyond that. And to the point where, not too long ago in a private session with Kris, he said to me that the Myrna that they first met not many years ago is barely recognizable. Of course, I started to cry because this work has been so meaningful to me. When I first came to this material, I was living a life where I was really busy as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter of aging parents, and a career woman, and everything. I looked at if someone should look at me from the outside, they say, man, has this woman ever got it all together? Wow. In the meantime, I was dead inside and suffering a great deal because I was just running myself ragged. Many years later, what I have learned about my external reality is so profound that I thought that it might help that I continue to talk about this with Kris and you, Dan, and make this perhaps available to any others who may be tuning in. And I've thought about it in terms of certain buckets of information. One of them, and I thought we might start there today, is who am I really? Who is Myrna really? And it's been pretty hard to absorb. Hard meaning challenging, because it's so against anything that I was ever brought up to believe. Secondly, where does all this work happen? Where does all the reality creation actually happen? And third, how does it happen? And fourth, how have I gotten in my own way over the years that I'm very aware of now and am changing, adapting? But there are ways, I learned very early from the early years and the study of law of attraction, that my thoughts create my reality. And that was very interesting. Prior to meeting Kris, I'm going to use something that a friend of mine used. I was a great creator of little things. I now understand so much more about what's really going on. And I think I know this information will be so profound for many who are listening in. And such a degree of, what's the word I want? Alignment with anybody who's been studying Seth. Greatly so. In fact, I think it was Kris who had said at one point that he and Uncle Seth were sort of on the same line of development or same dimension. So brilliant information. And whenever you're ready to come through, Kris, let's start.
No pressure, huh?
Well, I had one thing too.
Yeah.
Marta, you said something really interesting today, about expectation. And to me, that's if I think about the words of law of attraction, that seems to have a very similar idea of expectation, of expecting or attracting. So that'd be interesting to see, if we could touch on something like that. And yeah,
we will. In fact, when I came across that word about a year ago and started to talk about that with Kris and the group, it was a lot easier for me to get my mind around that word than beliefs. So something happens in my life, and immediately, without even thinking about it, I have a certain expectation about it, which ends up, and we're going to get into this in much more detail, ends up creating a certain feeling tone. And it's that feeling tone that creates my external reality. So I love the word expectation because it's so ingrained. And
in fact, I would suggest that at some point with Kris, that's specifically brought up. This is very important.
We'll do for sure.
I expect it.
Yes. And we shall
you put it out
deliver,
there.
Dan and I.
You put it out there, so.
Yeah.
Now we trust that you are comfortable, and we thank you for your consideration.
Yes, and thank you for yours always.
Your discussion is very interesting, and it lays the foundation for some very nice opportunities of discovery on this subject matter, because it is always a state of discovery. Even when someone might think they know exactly how it all fits together, The idea that one knows exactly might, in the long run, prove a little bit problematic in the sense that it no longer leaves the opportunities open to present themselves with new discoveries, new insights, new information. All of this is also part of the great big kitchen of creation, because there is always someone cooking up something very interesting, savory, delicious, and of course, within reach. But the idea for more is very important. But it is also good to know the basics and to have that kind of information from which to work. Even great chefs make interesting discoveries about new ways to use spices, creating new sauces, new flavors, anything to enhance that umami of the dish they are working on. And the very same thing can apply here. Open to opportunities for more growth and information. And the way you're starting is excellent. So perhaps now we will zip it momentarily and ask you to proceed.
Thank you.
Or should we say, let's cook up a storm?
Oh, shall we? Oh, yeah. There have been lots of those lately. So what I loved when I started on this metaphysical journey was understanding that I had some control. Because up until this point in my life, I felt as if I didn't have much control. I was reacting to everything that was going on in my life.
Indeed.
And
most people do go through life on default mode.
yes. So I was introduced to law of attraction. And I began to understand that I'm energy, everything's energy, my thoughts are energy, ideas are energy, and like attracts like. So really started to get an understanding like attracts like. If I think I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to be healthy. If I think I'm going to be sick, I'm going to be sick. I didn't, and I would use the terms, all that is, I would use the term the universe because I had not really bought into the idea of a religious God. I put that aside in an earlier part of my life. It was amorphous and it was very impersonal. And I was putting out this new energy, hoping to be new energy, out into some universe that surrounded me. And a few things happened. And then I met you. And what I found out, just still really just, I have to shake my head because it's been life-changing, is if the universe, I think I said this in an earlier session, it doesn't matter. If the universe is the ocean, and the ocean has a gazillion waves, we could call those waves essences, souls. Within each wave are bubbles of the same energy, a focal personality called Myrna. Myrna, as a bubble, has a wider wave called Sherilyn. You've given me my soul's name, and Sherilyn and a gazillion other waves are part of the ocean. That metaphor has resounded so deeply in me because now I understand when you said years ago that I am made of stuff that creates universes. I didn't know what the hell you were talking about at the time. I get it now. And of course, that goes against everything that I'd grown up to believe. I don't understand that. And I'm still wanting to hear more about that. Who am I really? Because I now understand, and I want to talk more about this. There's no outside, there's no other. It's me as a part of Charlene creating my entire reality. And I'd like to expand on that, Kris, with your help.
That may be a tall order, but we, as the chef, will try our very best to cook up just what you need. Now, you utilize the word metaphor. Metaphors, symbolisms, allegories, stories are all very, very important. Even in the most ancient times, your species used these things to communicate information. Sometimes information collected through entire lines of ancestries given out in the form of stories to the younger generations, so they too can add to the story and pass it on to the following generations. And in terms of allegories, metaphors, we could also say that each and every one of you here present now, watching and listening to this video, are all beautiful, delightful metaphors for the deepest part of your own being. Some may call this the soul self, essence, whatever label you utilize, but not a caricature, but more so as a living, dynamic energy, a force within which, as you stated, you have thoughts, you have feelings, feeling tones, emotions, imagination, all of the stuff that is then utilized to create the environment within which you have your being. Interestingly enough, you might be led to think that, of course, your environment, the apartment, the park, the streets, the city, the nation, the country, the continent, these appear to be that particular environment. But we would also posit that the true nature of the environment is in your mind. This is where you live, in the domain of your thoughts. And speaking of thoughts, it is also important to point out that just because someone may have a so-called negative thought does not mean that they have now hit a brick wall. What is important is, what do you do with that thought or with those thoughts? Do you allow that thought to attract more, to bring more of its brethren, the other birds of the same feather? Or do you just let it slide? Do not concentrate energy on it. Do not allow it to become front and center in your mind so that you give it energy, but instead just never mind it. Go on to something else that is more useful and pleasant to you. So everything has to do with you, the viewer, the listener, the person here and now in this moment. And the most important aspect is, you may think, for instance, that you are Daniel, that you are Myrna. But these are, again, expressions or metaphors for the person that you truly are. So you utilize the metaphor of the ocean, the waves, the bubbles, the drops, even the molecules of water. Now one may think, yes, I am a lovely bubble. Yes, I am a wave. Yes, I am the ocean. And yes, you are all of these things simultaneously. In fact, you are not only that ocean and all of its components, but you are also all the oceans. But you express that particular focused personality that is you in the here and now as, say, a drop or a bubble. while still maintaining your lovely connection to the entirety of all the oceans, even if you are not aware of how vast the nature of your being is. Being aware of your being in the here and now is the beginning. It is the key to appreciate who you are, even with all of your lovely little flaws and incongruities. These are also very, very important because they are part of your traits and characteristics. And just like the weaver will use a loom to weave a cloth, a tapestry, a carpet, each of the strands utilized in that beautiful process is also a part of your being, whilst you are as well the weaver and the loom. Everything in that process is a part of you. And to water all that down, to bring it down to the most basic, is that you are the soul. You are the individual that is in that body now. You are the one that entertains the thoughts, as well as look through the eyes, listen through the ears, smell through the nose, taste through the mouth, touch with the fingers. But that is not all of you. Because, for instance, you do not say, I nose, or I eye, or I ear. You say, my nose, my eye, my ear. So even unconsciously, you make a differentiation between the body, which you may have thought for a long time might have been who you are. But now you can access a different base of information, something that gives you a grander picture of whom and what you are, that you are not just an assemblage of parts, but that you are more than the sum of all of your parts. Sometimes it requires an intuitive leap to make that connection, to click in that you have a body, but it is not necessarily everything that you are. Because even as a child, you grew without necessarily growing your own body. It was taken care of you or for you by nature. And where is that body now? It is different. Where is your teenager body? The body you have now is different. Yet the person that was in that child or that teenager's body is still present. It has transformed. It has grown into more than it ever thought possible. So that basic premise that you are the soul is very, very important. And being the soul and being aware of your thoughts, aware of your feelings, not consumed by them, gives you a decided advantage. If you have thoughts, that means you might be able to do something about them. If you have sets of thoughts that you recognize are not necessarily to your best advantage, lo and behold, you can suddenly do something about it. You can change the nature of your thoughts. You direct your attention elsewhere. And finding other thoughts to focus on is not a difficult task, because you also live in an ocean of thoughts, of energy, of concepts and ideas and theories that you activate. So the very simple premise of recognizing that I am the soul, I am eternal, even though I may need to change those bodies every once in a while, has a significant impact into what you can do with your life. Does that make some sense to you?
finally, yes, of course, because for years believing everything happened outside of myself without understanding I am the self. And I want to go back to that little playful bubble for a moment.
Indeed.
That bubble.
Indeed. And we would also like to very quickly mention that you are not at the mercy of some great spiritual power as if you were a puppet on strings.
Right.
The bubble in the ocean has its own path or journey. It may decide to go here and there and everywhere. It is not beholden to the ocean.
No, it's not. And the ocean, I as same and different, that playful little bubble looks around and sees lots of bubbles. We're kind of all looking different and alike. And when you used the expression years ago, there's no outside, there's no difference. Now I get that everything that surrounds me is me. We're going to get into this, I know, at another time. But every single aspect as I look around me is an aspect of me, because we're all part of this wave and this ocean. And I've chosen to concentrate on certain ideas, and there are a gazillion ideas floating around me. And I get a choice, and I'll pick this, and I'll pick this, and I'll pick this. A lot of it happening at a subconscious level, of course.
Indeed.
The power of that, though, the power to know I have the choice as the bubble, because it's all me. And what do I want to be and feel and do in this lifetime as the bubble? I mean, it just opens up everything, and it's mine. Mine.
Indeed. It just effervescently bubbles.
Yes.
And it is important to point out that there are various schools of thoughts, of course. There are schools of thoughts focused on duality or dualism and non-duality, non-dualism. And each one will argue which one is the correct perspective. You are wrong. No, you are wrong. And surprisingly, duality and non-duality are merely different expressions of consciousness. So both are wrong and both are right at the same time. And you might even recognize that in your own existences. The difficulties come when there are judgments made. This is good and this is bad. It may not necessarily be something that benefits you, does not mean it is something bad. It means that you have a different preference. So whether something is dual or non-dual, ultimately matters not. What is important is, what do you want? What do you want to do? How do you want to be? That is the question. And only the individual can provide an answer.
What has changed, and Dan, I want to ask you to jump in here if you've got some comment. What has changed for me here is I no longer feel out of control. I no longer feel I'm a puppet on some string or someone's string or something's string. I have choice every single nanosecond as to, and not that it's easy to get rid of my conditioning. I'm not saying, no, it's simple. It's just not easy.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And very interesting perspective, if you like, comes from Bengal, East Bengal. And the saying is, because we have not used it in a very long time, is achintya beta beta tattva. Simultaneously different, yet the same. Dualism, non-dualism, simultaneously, they are the same, yet different. The important point is, what are you going to do with that kind of information? And how are you going to apply the results of the information for your own life?
Dan? Hi.
Hey, hello. What a great
Yes, he is
discussion.
far too quiet.
Yeah, you know what I've been thinking about, Kris, too, um, and correct me if this is like off topic, but I was been reading some of the law of attraction stuff, and particularly one of the Wayne Dyer, who really wrote a lot and I think studied with Abraham and Esther Hicks. But so much of it has become, and I think you were touching on this with the dualism, non-dualism. It was about get rid of your ego and just dissolve into source. And so what I was hearing when you were talking is like with the dualism, non-dualism, it's kind of like all true. Like there's sometimes where I need to let my conscious mind sort of back off and be like, okay, maybe I need to let another part of my identity, my being, take care of this. And other times where it's like, no, I need to take conscious control of this, and it's kind of a dance between those things. But it seems like some of these thought leaders or people that were proposing is like, just forget about this whole other part and just concentrate on this. So I was wondering on
And
your
that
take on
is
that.
how do we say, that is a leftover from very rigid Eastern teachings, that in order to become more spiritual, you must kill your ego. Somehow or other, it must be sacrificed. And yet, you cannot obliterate or eliminate the ego, because the ego is extremely well equipped to understand all of these things. It listens in, surprisingly. It is just as good as Alexa or Siri listening in on everything you think. And if you are of the mindset that you must threaten your own ego, it will put up some pretty heavy resistances. But if you begin to understand that the ego is an integral part of your own self, your higher self, it is a function of consciousness, and you allow yourself just a little bit even to assist the ego in opening up the doors of awareness, of opening up the great windows of perception to a greater sense of reality, it will gladly accommodate you, because that is also part of its function. The human species has done itself several incredible disservices. One of them is considering that the ego is anti-life. The other one is considering that only the intellect, the logical and rational mind are of any importance, and your intuitions, your imaginations, your feelings, your emotions, they should be stomped out of existence. So you have literally, as a species, try to cut off your collective nose to spite your faces. Does that make sense? So you can work very nicely with your ego and understand it properly, and you would be dramatically amazed at how much more progress, because the ego is integral to you get what you concentrate. It is integral to your focusing. So if you tell the ego, I want to open more awareness, I want to be able to understand more about the intuitive aspects of life, about the rich fabric of consciousness itself, it will say, finally, Dingbat is opening up. Let's get to work here and have some fun. Literally, let's party. Because it has access to all that information. We cannot stress that enough. But we can stress very strongly that give up the idea that the only way you will be spiritually fulfilled is by committing half suicide. How can a marathon runner think, oh, I need to lose weight to run faster. Let's cut off my legs. That would not be sensible.
Yeah, that wouldn't work very well, I don't think. And
you could try, but it will certainly be hilarious.
I'm gonna leave that to another portion of self to experiment with that. But I was thinking too, then as you're talking in terms of our identity, then it seems like that's an integral part of that whole identity is it's not the whole identity, but it is a part of that and that complex.
Mm-hmm. There's through I don't know how many courses you have offered every month over the years, how many workshops, how many personal time together that we have. There is so much to learn here. We can only just touch lightly on some of this. One of the things that was an eye-opener for me was when you said years ago too that there are countless numbers of souls. There have been some courageous ones who decided to experiment on something called planet Earth. And you called us the Oridan, this group of souls that decided they were going to play in this playground called planet Earth. And in order to do that, we had to forget who we were. And that now there are some of us starting to remember. But there is so much more behind your words. There's just so much to understanding who we are really.
Indeed. As an example, when we suggested that you had to forget certain aspects of yourself, certain amounts of information, in order to participate in this particular experiment on the earthly plane, if you like, compare it to someone who decides to go scuba diving. They have to forget how they used to breathe on land and must breathe through the mask. If they take that mask off to try and breathe, they will drown. So it is not that they have thrown all of that knowledge away. They have simply kept it on the back burner, so to speak, on the shelf. And there are certain kinds of information that need to be simply put aside for a certain amount of time for that soul to understand some of the very basic stages of reality creation.
Yes.
And that necessitates not a dumbing down of knowledge and of selfhood, but more so a going back to basics, going back to the rudiments of how the feeling tones, the emotions and imagination come together as a mechanism, as this particular technology of consciousness that launches certain kinds of thoughts into what then becomes three-dimensional experience. And once this is mastered, then the soul can progress, if you like, to other, perhaps even more challenging dimensions of existence, having had a certain background now in some of the most difficult types of reality creation. You get an inkling of that in your dream states, wherein in a dream you simply think, say, you are in Chicago, and in the dream state you want to think of Acapulco. Instantly, you are in Acapulco. So this is an other order, a more naturally occurring type of reality creation. And some of the components experienced in the dream state are incorporated into your waking reality. You know, if you focus on a certain kind of thought or sets of thoughts, and you provide it energy by simply concentrating on it, then lo and behold, you experience exactly that kind or something similar situation. And previously, you had mentioned expectation. So you can have a gazillion thoughts, gazillion beliefs, but without that ingredient, that special spice of expectation, it may never necessarily bear fruit. But once you add that ingredient, it gels everything, and the self, whether you call it the universe, the vortex, your greater mind, the self says, oh, they just added expectation. They expect this to now become their experience. So for instance, we have talked about this before. If you expect that other shoe to keep dropping, what can we say? You will keep the cobbler in business for a long time.
So let me give some context for this then. So I write down, I've done many vision boards over the years. I've done many affirmations. I've blah, 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 many of us have. And very aware academically, intellectually about the idea that like attracts like. So I'm working away and all of a sudden something happens. That's in my case, a loud noise. Without any thought, I immediately have a reaction that create a reaction based on an expectation that I've been digging down deep to find because it feels so automatic. There's an expectation of what that means, it's going to mean in my life. I immediately have a feeling tone attached to it. And that feeling tone then creates an external reality where this shows that probability to keep going over and over and over and over again. I want to get into that at another time, Kris, because this, yes, go.
Consider this particular kind of an idea. Now, somebody who works wood with a lathe may create something fascinating utilizing pieces of wood or other items with resin, a particular resin that hardens. That resin is what is going to make the masterpiece. So the resin solidifies. They put it on the lathe and they start carving and creating a vase or bowl or some other beautiful piece of artisan craft. But the resin itself holds everything together. So expectation is like the resin that holds everything. The feeling tones, you could say, in another kind of analogy, is the fuel. The expectation is the rocket ship. And the fuel fires that rocket ship, gives it the boost to fly. Even though the analogies are perhaps a little crude, you understand the point. And yes, so the expectations are extremely cogent. They are very, very powerful. And without expectations, you would not have not just your civilization, you would not have any civilization. You simply would not be. You expect yourselves to be. And it is so inborn, it is so ingrained and so innate to your nature, even at the biological and cellular and DNA level, that when you are born, you have the expectation of a life, that it will carry you, and that expectation carries you through life.
And most of those expectations are so innate and have been developed so early. Unless we start digging, they are automatic. And I'd like to hold on to that exploration for one of the other buckets of
Indeed,
information.
because there are, shall we say, artificial expectations, and then there are innate expectations. Yes. And the innate expectations are part of something we referred to before as your innate worldview of love, creativity, and collaboration. Artificial expectations you use to create many problems with yourselves, but you use the basic power of expectation, but in a way that may not be fulfilling to you.
Yeah, and I'd like to explore that further, because I understand that many of those early expectations came from trying to be safe in our families of origin. And we'll get into that at another time.
Indeed.
Okay.
Eternities of opportunities to talk about these things.
Yes, indeed.
You may think that you have a limited amount of time, but if you look at it in another way, you also have eternities to bring about all these kinds of discussions. And existence is poised ever so deliciously in between the two. That is your moment point.
Well, there's,
so
yeah. I was
perhaps
going to say
is a good time for a break.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of information and I get tired.
Indeed. What do you say, Meister?
Well, Kris, I think we're actually going to be towards the end of an episode. So let's we'll wrap it up. And if there's any final thoughts from you.
Indeed. If we do have a final thought, it is, on the one hand, your thoughts are filled with power and energy. And at the same time, do not let yourself get overwhelmed with every single minutia of thought that comes through your mind. Learn to let go of what no longer serves you, and you will immediately enrich your life.
Thank you.
But grab onto that which does enrich you, and you will also immediately enrich your lives. So that is the double-edged sword of consciousness. And with that, we thank you for your lovely consideration and expectations, because this discussion would not have occurred without that.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Kris.
Now, we do want to just drop in momentarily and add to what we have built. All of your technologies and advancements, whether it is the invention of the wheel, the invention of fire, whatever you want to call it, in your modern era, you have all of these wonderful technologies that facilitate this kind of a discussion. These are also all important reflections of the innate qualities of the self. So whether you kid around about Google being able to record the end of your sun in 2 billion years from now, or record the birth of a child or the opening of a leaf, it does not matter. All of these things represent stunning possibilities of the self, but in a way that you can manage. So they are not anti-spiritual. They are not dumbed down materialism in a certain way. They are not a poor excuse for advancement. They are part of your human experience. And do you know what? Your human experience itself, in spite of what you may think about it, is part of a greater divine experience. And it's not necessarily a term that we like to use, but it is convenient. So give up the idea that somehow or other, as human beings, you have already failed your spirit and you must now somehow become enlightened. You can become more aware of your natural heritage, but you are still spirits. It has been said that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, and to a certain degree that is correct. But you are also a spiritual being expressing some of its great talents and abilities in unfathomable ways. There are dimensions of experience that know nothing of these kinds of developments. But thanks to your own species and adventurous souls, because of this great network of spirits, if you like, knowledge of your experiences reaches out to others, just as their knowledge reaches out to you, and it mingles. Talk about a social party. There are exchanges everywhere. Many human beings get insights and inspirations. Where do you think they come from? They are ideas that are shared on this great network of consciousness. You think your internet is the greatest thing that has ever happened to your species. In some ways, it is correct. But the greatest thing that has ever happened to your species is your species itself and its abilities to unconsciously communicate with the entirety of the universe in that way. You just don't see it yet. We do. And what we share in information are just little ways that can open your mind and open your eyes to the great wonders of what it is like to be human.
To be a bubble.
So with that, we leave you to ponder the mysteries of your own self. The universe has many mysteries, but you, as yourself, have more mysteries to ponder. And now we take our leave.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kris. Thanks for watching, and if you would like to leave a question for Kris, drop it in the comments below. Myself, Serge, or someone from the Kris team will be checking and may use them to drive the discussion, put them in future episodes. So if you'd like to interact with the Kris community, feel free. Put your questions below, and we'd love to hear from you, and see you again next time.